Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Bare and Brutal podcast, the podcast where we bare our feelings and are brutally honest while highlighting stories of resilience and transforming pain into power. I'm your host, Michelle, and today we're exploring the experiences and perspectives of multicultural individuals. We'll talk about what it's like growing up in two different cultures, discuss the struggles that come with such an upbringing, and hear how these aspects come into play with family dynamics. We are joined with two people I'm so excited to have on the show, Kas and Kai. They are hosts of the Real Talk with Kas and Kai, their podcast, and they are a mom and son duo who represent just the unique experience of being Blasian Hapa. Cass is a beautiful, badass mom and entrepreneur, and Kai is a confident king, period, who has such a contagious and positive energy about him. Together, they make a dynamic duo that entertains and inspires. So, thank you so much for joining us, Kas and Kai.
Thank you for the lovely lecture. That was so good. I'm honored to be here. So typically how we start our podcast is like, you guys, welcome to today's episode. You're here with the Real Talk with
Kas
and Kai. And we're here. So we're glad to be here with
today
you.
on Bare and Brutal. So happy
Yes. Well, I have to tell the audience because when I first started this podcast, I literally went on Instagram, was searching for other podcasters because I'm like, I need some help. And I discovered y'all's page. And ever since then, y'all have been so positive and just a great connection. Like, we bounce questions off each other. I give you tips and resources. And it's just been so great having this relationship with people that are so supportive of each other and like willing to help each other out in this community.
Same. That's what we did when we first started our podcast, and we saw your page, we saw so many other pages. So it's very
it's an inclusive community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very positive.
Yes, it is. Well, I would love to start off with just hearing about y'all's stories. Can you both introduce yourselves and just share a bit about your backgrounds? What makes Kas Kas and what makes Kai Kai?
Sure.
Okay, sure. So I'll go first. I'm Mom. I'm Kas. How old am I? I'm 38 years old. I am originally from San Francisco, Oakland, Bay Area, California. I am, Michelle had mentioned it, we are Blasian Hapa, which is a fancy name for a mixture of a lot of things of the Black and Asian cultures. So specifically, my father is Bahamian from Bahamas, have some African descent, Nigeria, and actually he's got some Italian ancestry in there as well. I've come to find out just in my most recent years learning about my ancestry and things like that. And my mother, who I was raised with, single mom, is Chinese, Dutch, Indonesian, actually born in Holland, was raised there until she was 13, and she came here to America at the age of 13. So definitely part of our mission and who we are is that we are Blasian Hapa, mom-son duo, and our podcast name is The Real Talk with Kas and Kai. So that is encompassing a lot like yours, right? There's really no untouchable subjects, right, that we talk about. But specifically, we share from a multicultural and a multi-generational, obviously since I'm mom and he's son, point of view. And I would say just coming from such a diverse place as San Francisco, California, I have just grown up with a very open mind. I have definitely taken that with me in my years as I've grown just personally, right, outside of being a mom to him. And then I also have another son, Zen, who just turned 13 on Mother's Day, actually.
Aww.
So I'm a mom. That is a huge part of who I am in my background. But that's just a little bit about me. I have been in partnership or co-host with my son Kai, doing our podcast since, gosh, I think October of 23. So hasn't been a year yet, hasn't been that long, but I'm just happy to be here and really use the platform to share our stories and connect with other people from all different walks of life. So,
I
so
love
that's
that.
So this is the other half of the Real Talk with Kas and Kai. I'm Kai. I'm 21 years old. I just turned 21 on April 28th. I'm a Taurus. Yeah, I mean, just to tell some stuff about me, I'm a very positive, radiant person from others, from what I've heard.
Yes.
People told me when I walk in a room, I tend to bring smiles and much more. You know, just being the way so much has came up with me, my mom, like it. She had me at a young age, so it was just always us for a long time, for a decent amount of time, and yeah, I was born in the Inland Empire, San Bernardino to be specific, in California. I'm like, what else about me? There's so much. There's so much to me. I'm fun. I like to draw. I'm into cosmetology. I like to do hair, makeup. I'm starting to do nails. I'm currently in college too. I'm majoring in business education and technology. So, I'm just me. I still got a whole life of me ahead. So I'm just trying to take one step at a time, learn, and then just grow as a person. So that's what
I love that so much. And we're definitely going to explore more of both of your stories as we go further into the podcast today. I just want to affirm what y'all are doing. I wish that I had this kind of relationship when I was younger, growing up with my mom, where I could be open with her and talk about the things that y'all talk about on your podcast, because that's really valuable. And for you to model for people a healthy mom and son relationship where you have that kind of open communication with each other it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of ups and downs throughout the times, but this is my mom, my only mom. So
Yeah.
Thank you for saying
ups
that.
And downs
that's
are
definitely the goal. That's definitely the goal. Because it's not easy to put yourself out there. I think in a podcast, it's just one person, right? It's not easy. That's what I've learned in being in this space. It's just, obviously we've both picked very direct, out loud, right? Bare and brutal, real talk with Kas and Kai. So like we've talked a little bit before this too about just finding that perfect balance of being, bare and brutal and just laying it all out there. And also, just being mindful of the other hats and roles that we play. So thank you very much for saying that. It's just is very affirming because it's something that I think about for sure. So
of course. Well, I really want to talk about your Blasian heritage and how that has influenced both your personal identities and your family dynamics. Like, how was it growing up being Blasian? Tell me about, your insight into what it's like being Blasian Hapa, struggles, anything and everything. I'm gonna give you the floor. Either you can start.
Thank you.
You want me to go first?
I'll start. Yeah, I'll start because I am very proud to be of my Blasian Hapa heritage. It is something that I've always really been very proud of, and I'm very fortunate being raised by my Asian half, right? My mom, a single parent, especially in such a diverse, multicultural city as San Francisco. And then also, I think it has a lot to do with just my generation, and which is very different from Kai's, right? And even yours and a lot of your listeners, right? Being Blasian Hapa as I evolve more and I, just go on in my journey, it is really come to be who I am, and it's so special because it is not, it's like a subcategory. It's like, you know what I mean? Like there's not many people who are I've never met anyone who is the exact mixture that we are in being Blasian Hapa. And so I found a lot of just pride in it. I'm thankful that my Asian side, my mom is definitely, you can tell she's a Chinese lady when you see her, you know, but, and I don't know if it probably has a lot to do with the fact that she was born and raised in Holland, which is also a very diverse, multicultural, nation. And so I think that I found in my younger years where I felt very out of place, especially when I would go around my Asian family, right? Because that's what I was raised with. I did not have my father in my life, so I therefore wasn't exposed to my Black side, right? And so in later years, we'll probably go into that a little bit later, as I've went and searched in my ancestry, and we talked a little bit about that because I know you're embarking on that journey, which is awesome. I definitely encourage everyone to look into 23andMe or some type of ancestry to really find out, because I think that, and I've always taught this to Kai and my other son, is that, you know, you can't really identify where you want to go really unless you really know like who you are, right? Where you come from, where you've been, how all these things really tie in. So in every episode that we do, and really every conversation that I have with Kai, I try and bring that to the forefront, you know, like, why is this happening? You know, on and off camera it applies. And that's probably like my life's my phrase for, you know, my mission is just one thing. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And that really does it play a part in our cultures. And, you know, like I was saying, in my earlier years, I was very, you know, I felt out of place, especially when I was around my Asian family, because I was the darkest. I was, you know, culturally, I feel like, and generationally, it was very different. So I didn't really know how to be and fit in and still honor our Chinese heritage and our Asian culture, right? But now I've found those things that make us so different really help us to connect with people from all different cultures, right? And it's just that sense of pride that it's like, you know, you're one of one. Like, there's nobody, there's not a lot of people have the Blasian Hapa ancestry or background. And I've never met anyone that has our particular mix, which is really special. So just using all the things that, you know, at one point made me feel out of place, and using that as a gift, you know, in our uniqueness. So very proud.
Thank you for sharing your perspective on that. I want to ask one more question, and then I'd love to hear from Kai and how that has worked into your personal identity. But you mentioned, Kas, how you struggled finding where you fit. And for me, I mean, I don't know what the experience is like to be Black and Asian, but as an Asian American, I experienced that kind of conflict too, because there's times where, you know, I would go back and visit in Vietnam in the summers growing up. And when I go back there, they're like, oh, you're American. You're not Vietnamese. Or I come back here and I go to school, and growing up, I had experiences with racism or microaggressions, and these kids are telling me, oh, you're Chinese, or like, you know, you're not American, you're obviously so I can resonate with that experience of being pulled different directions and not understanding where you fit in it all. I'm curious though, like, how did you work through that, and how did you step into this confidence in your identity?
That's really good. I would say I've always been a pretty like introspective person. So like anytime, you know, I'm faced with, especially when I'm faced with things that like I don't know what to do with, I don't know where to put it, I'm uncomfortable, I feel some type of way, especially if it's my culture, because that's something that doesn't matter what you do, that is still who you are. That is what people see. So I just would go inward with that. And honestly, I heard that from another episode of yours with David Allen Tracy, where he said, you go inward, you do go outward in such a way, which I tell Kai and his brother all the time. It's like, you don't want to live your life in a way that you care what other people think, but you do care what other people think in a way that you want to be conscious of what you're presenting, right? And then also you go upward. So on top of being an introspective person where I go in, I go upward. And so I would just talk to God a lot. And in those conversations, even though he's not a person, he can't necessarily talk back. The feeling that I left with is that that's what makes you you. And that is your power, that difference, right?
Yes.
So when I was coming up, I didn't see a lot of Blasians. I didn't see a lot of Blasian or Hapa people. I am a huge fan of Kimora Lee Simmons because as I was coming up, she was that one, right? She was a boss. She was a mother. She was all the things. And she was very proud of her being Blasian and her heritage. So I really just got more into my culture and I learned about it, and I wanted to learn all about my Asian side, and I wanted to learn all about the other side and what really that was in a way that I could define what being Blasian Hapa is. And so
I love that. That's great. I also appreciate that there's more representation now in 2024 because back then we ain't had anything. So
right, even saying you introducing us and saying Blasian Hapa is like that's not anything that we haven't, that is not kind of common now. In my day, it was like we really have to explain what that is. So that is true. We've come a long way.
Well, Kai, please share, how has this affected your identity? I mean, love hearing from your mom, but I'm 24, so I'm closer in age with you, and I'd love to hear your experience in growing up.
Yeah, so basically when I was younger, my mom, she always taught me like, oh, you're Blasian. So I'm like, okay, that means I'm Black and Asian. So whatever she is, I just took a quarter of that. That's what I am. Predominantly, I'm dark. I'm a little dark skinned. So just Black. Yeah, my dad is just Black. So growing up, it was very much different for me because when I was in school, very much the kids they only saw me as a Black kid. They didn't. I mean, I never really had to explain like, oh, I'm mixed. I mean, I did say I was mixed, but they were just like, oh. So a lot of the times people thought I was like mixed with Korean or I was Samoan or something, which wasn't the case because I would explain. I'd be like, oh, I'm Black and Chinese, and they're like, okay, so like that's how it was. But growing up, nobody saw me as the mixed kid. It was just strictly, I was strictly prone to the Black side. And I had my fair share of being bullied back then, in high school, middle school, elementary school, because I was like the tallest kid in my grade. I kind of hit puberty a little early, so like I had acne, and it was just a very different upbringing. Elementary school, I would probably say that was probably like my hardest time trying to figure out who I was. And then middle school came, and then I started to start to be myself, trying to figure out like who I like what, like who I am. And that was just a whole era of me trying to figure myself out. And then to high school, it was a very different setting because I went to a predominantly Hispanic high school for my freshman year. And then for my sophomore to senior year, I went to a predominantly Asian school. So with that, I think for me, my struggle was I too Black for my Asian side, or was I too Black? Yeah, am I too Black for my Asian side, or am I too Asian for my Black side? Coming from being just my dad, he was in my life. He was in my life, but he kind of wasn't at the same time. So I just remember my mom, she would take me over there on the weekends to go see my dad's side of the family. And my grandma, she's like my best friend on my dad's side. And sometimes like growing up, like once I got to of age, they'll be like, oh, they'll make like little jokes and be like, oh, you're bougie, and it's like, why, what does that have to do with
Yeah.
being Asian or me being Black and Asian? Like,
Right.
so it was just a very like I had my struggles of just trying to figure out like, oh, why am I this dark, or why do I have these type of eyes? Why do I look so different to everybody? And yeah, and it's funny that my mom said, like, when you see all of us together, like when we go on family vacations, we're all different. We all
No,
look
I have
different.
someone else.
Now we all look different in some way. Like, you have my mom, you have me, you have my brother, you have my aunt, you have my grandma.
I do have a sister too. I should say that.
Yeah.
I have a sister. So she's Blasian Hapa as well. Same mom, different dads. Her dad is actually a lot darker than mine, and but she, like, literally to the everybody else, like, you can only tell that she's Asian because of her. She has the eyes and the skin tone, very light skin, fair skin, but the hair is Black. So you can see.
Wow.
Yeah, so even there, I was going to say that too. That's a really good point. How, and I resonate with what you said too, how I definitely did feel, especially being around my Asian family, that I was the darkest. Or, my mom took me back to Holland when I was 13, and it was like, but you're not really that because you're American, right? Or you're too Black to be Chinese, or you're too, or you don't speak the language, or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
But the power, and I think what I ended up doing with that, being multicultural, is such a powerful thing, because that's what society says. You don't speak Vietnamese, so you're not a true Vietnamese woman, right? I'm too dark to be Chinese. I don't speak the language, whatever. I'm more this, not enough of that. Right. But I learned, being multicultural and being exposed to so many different cultures, and I already was not what people were thinking. We already weren't, my mom and I, because she's Chinese to the eye, but she's the most downest, most Black Chinese lady I've ever come across. And most times that's what people would say, right? So what I found is that, sadly, even when it comes from your family, when they saw Kai and they're like, oh, that's the Asian side, that's the Chinese side, you're bougie or whatever, that it's really just people's ignorance. Even when they, like, I appreciate when people just ask what I am, what my mixture is, what my heritage is, instead of assuming, because that just really exposes society's ignorance. You know what I mean? Like, usually if they do, they assume, and it's all the things that we're not. But it just shows that that's literally where they're coming from, and that's what their thoughts, it doesn't really go outside of that. It's Chinese, it's Korean, it's Samoan, or Filipino, what I mean?
Right. To kind of like bandwagon off of what my mom's saying, just like another thing I just got from like my struggles, especially being in school, one thing I had a hard time with was my friends wise, because I was very much to myself. Like, I didn't know who to hang out with. Sometimes I'll go hang out with the Black kids. Sometimes I'll go hang out with the Hispanic kids. Sometimes I'll go hang out with the Asian kids. But to everybody else, I was just, they looked at me as like an outsider, like they didn't know. So like a few times the Black kids, they'll be like, so like, are you really Black? Like, are you just like, is it just like, what type of Asian is it? And then I have to explain. And then to the Hispanic kids, they're like, oh, you're like different. And I'm like, yeah. And then
you're brown like
and then one of the things that I had to kind of like be conscious of, like when it came to like my Asian friends, sometimes like when I make a best friend with somebody or a close friend, I'll ask them like, what did you first think of me, like when you first met me? And they're like, I didn't know how to approach you because you look intimidating. And I was like, me? Like, I'm intimidating? And then they're like, yeah, because they've never met someone like me. So that's the reason why the reason why they said that. So I was like, okay, I can be mindful of that. Another thing, just to bandwagon of what my mom said, one of the things I love now in just being Blasian Hapa is when I see all of us together, like there's so many people that come up to us and they're like, your guys' family is so beautiful. Like you guys are just like, so like, you guys are just beautiful. And we're like, thank you. And then that's the only thing that makes me happy about being Blasian and with my whole family is that like, that's what I take from it is like, we're different, but we're beautiful at the same time. So that's the struggles and the good things I took from being, Blasian Hapa. And the generations, that's a whole different thing. So
yeah. I'm sure we can talk about that all day. Too. So
yes. Well, thank you for sharing. And man, you hit it right on the head on the nail when you were talking about how it's just people's ignorance. I mean,
that's it.
When people don't have exposure to these things, they just make their own assumptions based on the knowledge that they have or the knowledge that their parents gave them,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think too, Michelle, and you've shared a little bit about your background, right? And that you were raised with other cultures, which makes you multicultural as well, even though that's not necessarily your direct DNA or ancestry, right? But I think it's understanding that is when people don't understand you, it's because of their ignorance. It's because they don't know. But that, which is, I think that just came to me now, which is so important about us continuing our work. And from the point of view that we come from and speaking about cultures and these things, it's so important to do that because how will they know if we don't expose them to it, right? Like, because if you think about it, it probably is hard for someone who is of one culture, right? One dimension in that way to look at someone be really happy with themselves and in a place of peace in all of it, right? In all of their cultures. And that's what it was. And I think it's so important that we continue our work for others because it is easy to be multicultural. And when you feel that feeling of being the odd one out, no one looks like me, where do I go? Where's my sense of community? If you don't have people who are showing up and speaking, right, if there was no Kimora Lee Simmons, I might not feel this way. I might feel a little shame. I wouldn't be as proud, to have these conversations and just be like, oh, I know you don't mean that. You just don't know. Let me show you, right?
Yeah.
So.
And I think
and sorry,
in society,
to bandwagon off what she said,
people need
that
labels.
was another thing too, visiting like my great grandparents and stuff. Whenever we would go visit them, like we would have family fly in from
Holland,
Sweden, all that. So, when we were all like in a like area together, like I'll just look at everybody and be like, that made me start looking at myself differently because it's like, oh, I'm the darkest one here. I can't speak Dutch. I can't speak Chinese. So like it just kind of like sheltered me to like, back then I to look back at my younger self to now, I used to be very sheltered, very quiet, very much like just sit there, look good, and that's it. Very observant. But now like just being a little older and grown, I just came into the fact of to embrace it, love it.
Yeah.
This is family at the end of the day.
And it's whatever you make it, right? That's what I've learned too. It's literally people saying things like that just exposes that they just don't know, which is that ignorance, which is not a bad thing. Now, if you choose to stay in that, and then it becomes prejudice and racism and things like that. But for the most part, I don't think that that's what it is. It's people are looking through their lens, and if it's a lens of being one culture, it is hard to see somebody be multicultural and to see somebody who is completely happy and whole and loud in that, right? But that's society. So I think that's, we've come a long way. And
we have.
I had my little fair share of racism because back in school, nobody, to nobody that doesn't know me, they only saw me as the black kid. Like they didn't, like even though I would say I'm mixed, they didn't care. I'm the black kid. So I did have my fair share of like, being called like blackie and all this other stuff. And I mean, it was back in like elementary, middle school. It was kind of hard back then, just because like that was just the kids back then, and that was how we grew up.
Kids are brutal
because kids
brutally honest.
Kids back then in my time, it was very. We're in the same generation, so it's probably it was a little bit probably the same. So it was just it was hard for being in school, and but it made me the person that I am now. To where I don't let no one tell me who I am.
Period.
I know what I am. So
and you just don't know, and it's okay.
Yeah, I would rather prefer someone to ask me instead of assuming. Just because like. You may not know, and I'm willing to teach you if you're willing to come at me correct.
Exactly.
And that helps to broaden your horizons, too, because there's so much more than, the general Chinese, Korean, you know what I mean? And even Korean, and that's over the last few years has, Korean culture really became very popular and cool and things like that, as it should, but it's just to show that there's so much more out there.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the times people see multicultural individuals and they might say, oh, well, I don't see color. Like, everyone's human. But I think, though, that it is important to acknowledge, like, there's colorism. Colorism exists.
Heck yeah.
And, I mean, y'all are talking, about your experiences. But it's going the other way where you like don't acknowledge it at all too is not the way to go either. And I think it's important to honor both sides. You are Black, you are Asian, and there is no like you have a right to both cultures, right?
Exactly.
And and I also think the reality is, Cass, you are raising Black children.
Yes.
You're raising Black boys. And in today's world, unfortunately, comes with unique challenges.
Yes.
Especially considering the societal issues and the safety concerns that, fortunately, you have to deal with as a Black man. And I would love it if you could just share how you have navigated these challenges as a mother and what things you have done to support and protect your sons, especially the unique situation you're in where you were raised by your mom who's Chinese. So how did you go about this as a mom?
Wow, that's a really good question. I'm just trying not to get emotional.
Okay, we're letting you know if she cries, I'm not going to cry, so we'll
all cry together.
It's my time, so I'm already like, okay,
listen.
I was crying, girl, listening to your stuff before this and everything, so, but it's good because I can talk about it. See, I'm on the other side of it, at least with him, now that he's grown into a different season.
I think that's why we're so close now, and that's why a lot of people. That's why when they see me, they see her, and when they see her, they see me. So, I think that was my upbringing with Nero, because it was just us at one point. So
Yeah, I mean, I've been actually, my wife and I just celebrated 11 years of being together. The other day, we've been married. July 22nd, I think it'll be 8 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Before that, I also, and we'll never forget that. And I do attribute a lot of my successes and specifically to raising Kai, to being a single parent, right? Because that was, the first part of your life and a very integral and a very long time, and so I would attribute it to, honestly, God. That whole, what David Allen Tracy said, I mean, that just really summed it up. If I could give, someone in a different generation in their 20-somethings, to my children, to other mothers, to other Blasian Hapa, to anyone, is, going inward, being mindful of what you're presenting to the world, and definitely upward. Because how would I do it being raised by an Asian woman? How would I do it going through all of the generational changes, technology, right?
Yes.
All of the social, economic issues that we have all went through. Because let's face it, it's tough to be Black and Asian separately, right? The things that we've come through, that we've been through as a society and a culture over the past few years specifically. And so I always was very mindful of that. And then mindful of the fact that, how am I going to do this? And I'm not a man. I'm not a Black man, right? I'm not a man. I was doing it by myself as a single parent. And I just wanted them to be solid. I just wanted to, I envisioned this day sitting here and that he would be as awesome as he is. How we were going to get there, again, just a lot of prayer, community. I befriended mothers who were older than me that had grown children, that had Black sons.
Yeah.
I was just open to, a better way. And I wanted a better way. That's what it is. I prayed a lot for that discernment and guidance, that he was my, God was my provision being a single parent. And I just tried to really think about what even though, it's funny, as I said that I'm married to my wife. So obviously I'm gay, right? And so, and I'm raising men, I'm not a man. So I just tried to always hold on to what I thought a stand-up man would be. How I wished my father would have shown up for me. So that's what I kept at the forefront of my mind. And just, and then also it's hard because knowing all those things, keeping all those things inside and still showing up every day, getting up, single parent, doing the whole rat race, having to provide, right? Things like that. And then also doing that, and society already had my story written out for me, right? As a statistic. So I always kept that in the forefront of my head too, to try and break those generational curses, right? Even outside of our own family, trying to break generational curses in our own family. That's what I just tried to keep in the forefront of my mind. How I would want him to be, how I'd want them to be.
Well, you're getting me emotional now. Hearing you, oh my gosh, I'm literally about to cry.
No, I know, like I'm literally about to cry.
Because hearing your strength and hearing how you were so intentional about being a mother for your son. We all got daddy issues in this room.
Okay.
But
Yes.
So when you said that even though you didn't have that experience being raised by your dad, you thought, okay, well, how would I want my son to be raised? What would a stand-up dad do? And that really hits home with me because my mom, she did the thing. And I commend you as a single mother and all the single mothers out there. I salute y'all because you're doing 2 jobs. And I'm like speechless right now.
Oh no, I don't mean to do that, but yeah, it is. No, that's why I said I get so emotional, because it's like, and that's the thing about life, is that you get into it. So when someone asks me that, it's like I do get so emotional because I really have to go back there. And and you know that, I know, even you guys being in your 20s, you've already lived enough of life to know that it's not predictable.
Yeah.
Right? That you really only can put your best foot forward, and that's constantly what it was. And I was moving so fast that it was like, dang, before I knew it, I look back and it's like, he's 21, so it's like, it's not over, but it's a different season, which is what I constantly tell him. And especially with our podcast, like I said, is that I'm constantly like, yeah, that's who I am. I'm a real person. Like, constantly, I could tell you on and off the podcast, right? That like conversations with me, like they'll be like this. We're laughing, and in 20 minutes we're crying. We're having all the feels, right? That's the realness. That's who I am. Yeah. But also like trying to figure out, like, because I am conscious and I do care about what I present, right? Kind of like, is it too much, right? But that's that little girl in me, and I think that's honestly, I attribute to that to more of my Asian culture, where we want things to look a certain way.
Yes.
And we don't focus necessarily on the feeling, where that comes from, the root of the problem.
Yeah.
The root of the gift, even if it's not bad, right? So really trying to find that balance, but it's about being intentional, like you said. That's how I did it. It's just being intentional, and it's like, I don't like this. I don't like that people look at me already a certain way, that my story, this statistically, my story's already written, and I don't like that, and I want to change that. So used a potentially bad situation, a hard situation, and being a single parent, and just tried to make it the best.
You did what you could, and you did it.
Thank you.
Kai, if you're comfortable, I would love to hear your insights on being raised by a single mother, and also, do you feel that you maybe missed out on the experience being raised by a Black man? Were there things or times in your life where, you struggled with feeling a little lost? Because I'll tell you my experience. I mean, I don't know my biological father, and he wasn't in my life. I was raised by another man. That dad ended up also leaving my life, and that's been something I'm still working through. So I'd love it if maybe you could share your experience, and if you've navigated challenges with our daddy issues.
Yeah,
this is good.
So, I mean, just to start off with, like, being raised by a single mom, just being grown now, when I look back at my life, I can only say I'm very appreciative of what my mom has done for me. I'm probably getting a little bit. I'm like, yeah, my mom, she I'll let her get some for me too.
You got, of course.
So just
We're getting tissues.
Yeah. So just to kind of just start off, my mom, she was a single mom. My mom, she was, her main thing that I took from what just being us, was that she just wanted to provide for us. So like I would have babysitters that would, because she would work those long nights to make sure we have a roof over our head, food in our stomach, clothes on my back. As long as I had those, I was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So with that, it was, I was always happy with my life. Like, even though my dad, he is here and I know who he is, but internally and mentally, I don't know my dad, basically. Like, he's not really, he's not, I more so see my dad as an older brother type of sense. So
the connection is really with your paternal, your dad's mom.
Yeah,
your grandmother.
so that's why my grandma and me, that's why I'm so close to her, because it was never my mom going through my dad. It was always my mom going to my grandma. And when I was there on the weekends, where my mom would either go drop me off, or the few times that my dad would come get me, my dad was really not there on the weekends. He was always, out partying, hooking up with girls, bringing women around. So my grandma, she was my person whenever I was there on the weekends. She would, if my mom needed help, my grandma would do the best that I can with getting me school clothes, making sure I had money, or just little things like that. And I just knew I didn't want to be like my dad. Just seeing the things that he brought on the few days that I was with him, it just didn't mean I didn't want to be like that. So as you can see, I'm kind of the complete opposite in a sense. So I'm in the complete opposite sense of that. I love my dad. I appreciate everything that he has done. But I just more so give everything up to my mom, because she was the one that was there. She was the one that took me to school in the days that I can. Whenever I got field trips, she would do the best. She would make sure I got there. And it was just a different upbringing. So I just give thanks to my mom, because without her, I don't know who I would be,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just it was just a different type of childhood, but I take everything with a grain of salt and I grow from it, you know.
Mhm.
So
Well,
yeah.
The second part of that was, do you feel you've missed out?
Not necessarily. I feel like everything that has happened was for a reason, you know.
mhm.
You know, I did a few programs after school. Um, I was very much in the arts. I was on a few dance teams. I was in choir. Um, Back in elementary school, just to kind of bandwagon off what I said about my dad, um, even though he was there, I did try a few things to try to get his attention. Like me, I'm not a big sports person, but back in elementary school, I tried out for the basketball team because he's into basketball. So I did that, and I did that for like about a year. Sad thing, my dad never came to a game of mine. Um, my mom was there though, so um, yeah, there was just I don't feel like I missed out on my childhood or missed out on a few things. I feel like everything that has happened in my life happened because it was supposed to happen. So that's I feel like
I think you definitely grew from all of the things that could have affected you negatively.
Yeah.
I've always, just growing up, I've always been a positive person. Like my mom tells me when I was born, I didn't come out crying. She would sit me up on a bed, and I would just sit there and just look around and do nothing. So I think just now being grown, like I'm a very like, if you don't know me, I'm a very quiet person. I'll like smile. I'm always happy. But yeah, I really never tried to look into like the negative things. I always try to look at everything from a positive mindset um, because I feel like how she says, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Even though I have made a few mistakes in the past and lied and do all that, that's just a kid thing. So I feel like life happens in a sense,
Yeah.
So I just had to, do what I can do as a kid. So
just roll with it.
Exactly.
I commend you so much for making these realizations as a young kid. I mean, you said you tried to get your dad's attention at one point, but it seems that throughout time, though, you just realize, oh, well, my mom's the one who's here for me, or my grandma. And so I'm going to focus on the people who are here instead of trying to chase after someone who isn't. And that is something that took me a really long time to realize. And so, wow, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
And
No, I just think that it just came from just growing like almost every weekend, seeing my dad and just seeing the same things over and over again. So I just was like, he's not wanting to change, and I can't change him, even though just like a little background on my dad, he's the only kid of my grandma. I have 4 other siblings on my dad's side.
Yeah, he went on to.
So he didn't stop with me. He kept going. So I have 4 other siblings on my dad's side. We all have the same dad, but all different moms. So with that, it was just I just had to come to a realization that like my dad. Sad fact: me and my sister, she's 14 now. Whenever we talk about our dad, it's we know he's there to help sometimes, but we call him Raggedy because it's just he just.
The kids is going
we're just being honest. We're just being honest. So he's. I mean, there's really not much I can say on him. I mean, my dad's grown. He's gonna do what he does. I'm grown. Love him, but like, yeah.
I think there's sorry not to cut you off, but I think that's really, and that just came from what you just said, is that's so powerful, and that's a nugget, audience members, 20 somethings especially, it's just, there's a saying by Maya Angelou is like, when people show you who they are the first time, believe them.
Yes.
And if I could, like, that is such a golden nugget for life, specifically for 20 somethings, is that I think that from what I took from what you just said of how you took a lot of adversity and negatives and made them positive and didn't let them affect you in a way that a lot of people don't know how to navigate out of, and end up, you know, being that person that just doesn't ever get off the mark. And it's because of what happened to me. It's because of how my dad did or didn't show up. And you took those things and made it so good. It's because you accepted that it is what it is. And that through it all is that people are going to do them. That's one thing I do know, is people are going to do them. And that ultimately has nothing, because even as you were coming up, every time that, like, he would disappoint you, or the times that you tried to get his attention and he didn't respond in the way that you did, our conversation was, again, very intentional. And I knew how he felt. I knew that it affected him, even if I didn't know how he felt. And so I used that opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because I think that's another thing about just being a parent, especially in today's culture, is that it's so separate. You know, the kid is almost like parenting themselves in a lot of situations, because there's no open space with the parents. They don't know where to go that. And in life, you're going to feel those things. That's inevitable. But you should ideally be able to go to your home base, your parent, someone, right, where you can feel bare and brutally, that's how I feel. It sucks. I don't like it. I wish it was different. And then just being like, you know what? That's him, but how am I going to respond? And that's always our conversation. Man, yeah, no, that does suck. I know how you feel. I actually have a very similar situation with my dad, right? But that is one thing where I feel like we even broke the generational curses with us, is because I already knew those things. A lot of things that he's saying about his dad now, I already knew that. And I never kept him from that. I still, every weekend, I made sure he was there, because I did want him to see the Black side, right? That culture, that other side. And I did want you, whether he was there or not, or whether he showed up the way that we want him to, ideally, I wanted you to make that choice on your own, which is always going to happen, which I knew in my own experience, is that my mom, it doesn't matter like how she tried to control it, or even if she did or not, you're going to feel how you feel, and the truth always comes out, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we're at today.
Just to say, like, back then I always used to, you know, like, there was only so much crying and sadness I could go through as a kid, especially. So, and there was a few times where it's like, I would question my dad, but then it also made me, like, look at my mom some type of way. I don't know how, but it just made me look at her some type of way. But then I had to, like, after the few years, I had to slowly realize it's like, it's not my mom's fault. My dad is who he's gonna be. My mom is her own person. She's the one that's here, and even though he is here, he's not here. So that's just, it was just I, like, even though I started it at a young age with my dad, just realizing, like, oh, he's never gonna be the dad that I want him to be. Maybe when we get older, he might be. I don't know. But
it's going to be because
it's all because he wants to, not because I told him. And there's been plenty of times where I tried to reach out and tell him how I felt, and he maybe took it in, and maybe he took the information and kept it, or maybe just went in one ear and out the other. There was just those times where I was super sad, but then it was like, what's the point of being sad if he's doing the same thing over and over again? You know, so I just had to realize at a young age that, like, I'm gonna be there for me, and the person that's got my back is my grandma on my dad's side and my mom, and any other family members too. So
woo, this is some powerful stuff, y'all. Oh my gosh. Well, one, I relate so much with y'all's stories. Woo, go again.
No, it's okay.
Wow. So I found out that the dad who had raised me, he was not my biological dad. I found that out when I was 12. My mom took me on a walk and said, "Hey girl, let me tell you this." Yes. And so it was very much
Stop.
a
Wait,
shock
we're getting.
for, yeah, for 12-year-old Michelle. I was like, what? My whole life's a
Oh,
lie. And that we kind of didn't really have any conversations after that. My mom asked me, hey, do you want to discover him? And I said, well, no, why would I want to do that when he left? And that's me coming from, a 12-year-old. I didn't know better, but the conversation ended. There was nothing else after that. And so when you don't have knowledge about things, your mind ends up making assumptions.
yeah.
And I think for a large part of my life, I always wondered, like, something must be wrong with me. Like, maybe I'm not good enough for something that he didn't want to stay, or he didn't want me. And so I felt a lot of anger toward my biological dad, and also hurt. And then recently, in the past, probably about 3 years ago, something happened with my dad who raised me, and things came out. The truth always comes out.
Yeah.
And ended up, I set some boundaries, and I said, I can't have you in my life anymore. And so I lost that dad. And that was a huge mourning process for me. And I went through a period of time where I was like, something must be freaking wrong with me that no one wants to
Yeah.
stay in my life. And again, we didn't talk about it. Mama and I didn't have some conversations. She didn't sit me down. And recently, y'all, I would say like 2.5 weeks ago, I had a really, really vulnerable and honest conversation with my mom that we've never ever had before. I mean, I love my mom. She's like my best friend, but we never get close to tough stuff like that. And in that conversation, it all just came out. I was telling her, all my life I always wondered what's wrong with me, like why am I not good enough for these men to love me enough to stay? And that stuff follows me in my relationships and like how I've functioned and made decisions throughout my life. And hearing my mom was saying, I didn't want to talk about these things with you because I didn't want it to bring any more pain. And like you mentioned earlier, Cass, it's kind of like the Asian side where we try to keep up appearances and facades, and we try to push things down and
You
just get
swallow
through
it.
them.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I told my mom, I was like, look, Mom, I've made my peace with this. I don't blame you for any of these things. I'm just telling you how I felt. And it would have been so much better if you could have just talked to me about these things. If you could just told me and explained, Mom, or you and your dad, like, it's not working out, or just explaining and having the conversation with me that this is the reason why he left, or it has nothing to do with you. That would have helped me so much. And I told my mom, I was like, I want you to share these things with me. It's not going to cause me more pain. It's actually going to heal us if we talk about these things openly. And, she's crying, I'm crying, like ugly, sobbing, snot everywhere.
Oh my God.
And it was a really healing conversation. And, you talked about this earlier, how we're breaking these generational cycles, and it's hard work. It's so hard. And I had to come to a point where I extended grace to my mom and also to my dad, and understanding that, they did with what they could with what they had. And ultimately, I'm the one who's harboring this anger. I'm the one who's holding on to this resentment. And they say forgiveness is for you and not for the other person. Right. And so I had to take inventory and reflect and be like, okay, well, how do I want to live my life? Do I want to continue being this angry person? Like, no one would blame me. No one would blame you, Kai, for, going down a different path and being angry at your dad and making bad decisions. Like, people would understand. But what I love is that we both have we took a moment. We're like, hey, this is not how I want to show up. This is not the kind of life that I want for myself. And we're going to do better. And that is something really, really hard to do. And props to both of you for
you too.
Thank you.
You too.
No, I was gonna say also, having like my mom and my dad there. My mom, she never, like, growing up, she really never bad mouths my dad for me to look at him a certain way, because I think she knew that I was gonna come to, like, she already knew him.
Yeah, I did.
So she was like, she never really talked bad about my dad to me. She was like, she's like, I want you to, figure out how you guys are gonna be and how you want to have that relationship with him, and that's just how I figured it out, because I didn't want to take that away. Yeah, and that's what you said too. You know, which defense of your mom is like knowing what she knew. Yeah, and then being mom is number one, right? And it's cultural, it's generational, it's everything. But I do believe that her intention was to stop the pain, was to stop the bleeding, right? But that's also one of those generational cycles that we don't realize, because the intent is right and it comes from a pure and good place. But we don't realize when we do that how it doesn't stop it. In fact, when you said that forgiveness is not for other people, it's for you. By doing that, by parenting like that, by continuing that cycle, it absolutely doesn't stop it. And in my mind, my thinking was always like, I have to allow him to see for himself and make his own decision, especially because I knew what it was to not have my dad, and that my mom was my all. And that even I feel like my mom did that to a good extent, where she tried to protect me from further pain. But that blocked the ability for me to make my own decision and see for myself. Right. And then when that happens, it's like, that's really painful. Your mom carried that and she knew, and knowing that, and knowing how that will affect you, and that one day you could possibly turn and be like, not only am I upset that he wasn't there the way he should have been, my dad, right? But I'm also a little upset with you that you took that decision, that away from me. And, and that's where, when you said that you had that conversation, I've also, to be honest, today I'm not in contact with my mom. I haven't been for a few years, more so off than on. And a part of that, in my healing and that forgiveness that I had to do with myself first, and breaking that generational cycle, is that we have to stop doing that, because it doesn't stop it. In fact, it puts my mother's burden on me. You see what I'm saying? Because as a child, you didn't have anywhere to put that. It was an unspoken thing. And then it's even worse, because it's something so pivotal, something so deep, something so important that you didn't even know about, right? Yeah. So, I never wanted to take that away, and I was just prayerful still in that, that he will see. And of course, not even prayerful that he would learn for himself. I was prayerful that he would change, and that his outcome, his takeaway would be different, but then also just accepting that we can't change anyone. We can only change ourselves. Yeah, I was saying that because I felt what you were saying, like how you had that conversation with your mom and all that. I felt you on that. Like, I'm giving my props to you, because I felt the same way growing up. My dad was here. I don't know him like that. So that's why I'm like, I feel you on that part.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for coming on here and being vulnerable and doing exactly what this podcast is designed for. I believe we'll start wrapping the episode up here now. But before we go, though, what kind of key messages or takeaways would you like our listeners to gain from your story and your experiences?
I would just say to accept, we don't have to like that about life, that it's always something. It's always, there's a saying that it's like you're either coming out of shit, going into shit, or currently into shit.
Yep.
So it's always going to be something. And so, especially because I know you're 20-something, that's a lot of your demographic and your audience. For my son, right? Anybody younger than me, it doesn't even matter. His age is nothing but a number. You're wise beyond your years, Kai as well. And I just, definitely keep doing your work. Keep doing your work, your personal work, and accept that life is going to life, but always be introspective and asking yourself, but what am I going to do? How am I going to come out better? And that's what it's about. It's just, and there's another saying too, life is going to life, and it's not what happens, it's how you respond. So.
Yes. Thank you.
I guess for me, for my message, I would say everything that's happening in your life is for a reason. It's going to get you to that goal, to get to where you want to be, to get to who you want to be. Just take one day at a time, breathe, try to stay in a positive mindset no matter what, and smile. Smiling helps a lot. I've noticed that. I've had my fair share of that. So smile more, stay positive, try to stay happy as much as you can, and remember everything that's happening for your life is for a reason.
Thank you so much for both of those messages. So important.
So welcome.
Before we go, how can our audience connect with you, learn more about what you're doing, and where can they find you to follow your content?
So if you guys want to follow us on our podcast page and everything is The Real Talk with Kas and Kai. We have our own personal social medias. Everything is The Real Talk with Kas and Kai. We have her personal Instagram. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, Boss Queen Kas. But you'll see me like commenting and stuff on The Real Talk with Kas and Kai on Instagram. YouTube, we always stream our podcast episodes, even though we've been gone for a little while. We are back. Okay.
Yes.
We are back, so stay tuned.
Yes.
Thank you to Bear and Brutal for bringing us out.
Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Real Talk with Kas and Kai.
All the things, all the platforms.
Everything. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on the show today. It was so great talking to you both and hearing your story. Honestly, we had a little therapy session here, which is great.
All the feels in an hour and almost a half.
Yes. Those of you listening, if you would like to follow along with their journey and tune into the Real Talk with Kas and Kai podcast, please go show this amazing mom and son duo some love. You can find their socials and links all in the show notes. They've got so much entertaining content, so be sure to check them out. And thanks again, Kas and Kai, for coming on here and bearing it all. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And as always, I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.